Hey, everybody, welcome to Real Talk. What a season. Season 1 is now under our belts, if we want to even say that. But
there's a lot under my belt. I'll take season 1.
You know, season 1 is the best thing to be. I mean, when we started this, we kind of weren't sure what it was going to be, we kind of knew like where we were going, but we didn't realize the magnitude and the impact that it was going to have on people. I think I didn't anyway.
I didn't. I think we hoped, and we talked about it, we prayed about that it would reach those that needed to have the conversation. But I think when you start hearing back from the audience and they're saying, this is amazing, this is helping me, we'll talk about testimonials here in a little bit, then yeah, I think it far exceeded what we had initially anticipated.
Yeah, I would agree. And so if you've been a listener thus far, we're kind of wrapping up our season today and just kind of talking about what we got from each episode, because I know there was so much in each conversation that we had. And so to even just think back, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know, to narrow it down just a few things. I feel like I learned and grew through those conversations so much that I hope that the listeners at home are feeling the same way, but I know for sure that I grew as well.
So if we had to go back, I know we had in our first episode, we talked about really our introductory episode. We talked about our whys. So if you want to rehash what your why was, just how we got to this place.
Yeah. So my why, it was one that was bred out of lack of conversation growing up about mental health and counseling and kind of just that disparity between what was really going on and the resources that I had out there. For me, it kind of became near and dear to my heart as I walked through my own mental health struggle and just kind of trying to figure out what is anxiety, what is depression, how do I handle this when I haven't been given the tools, and I didn't hear anybody have those conversations about, this is what it is, this is what it looks like, this is how you can, battle that. It was just that we'll pray about it, pray about it. And sometimes you need to partner with a mental health professional to walk through that season with you in accompanying that prayer. So that was kind of where my why was born, is just to help facilitate those conversations and help people realize that they aren't alone. I think that's one of the biggest things for me as a counseling pastor is when people say, it just felt nice to know that I wasn't alone in feeling how I was feeling. It felt nice to have someone sit and just listen with me. And I think for me, that is my biggest why, is to be able to facilitate those conversations so that people that maybe don't have a background in mental health, either issues or training, can watch these podcasts and learn how to have those conversations and how to be open and how to listen to those people. Just facilitating those conversations and helping people realize that they aren't alone when they're going through a struggle.
Yeah, and I don't know where mental health became a dirty word. I'm trying to figure that out. I know some of it was cultural. I'm Hispanic. So for Latino families, you just don't talk about stuff that happens outside the four walls of your home. And as an adult, retrospectively, I was able to go back and realize I dealt with a lot of trauma growing up. I just didn't know it was trauma because it was my normal. So once I left home and started to experience life outside of the four walls of my house, I started to realize some of the stuff doesn't seem to be lining up. I was very blessed that I was active duty, and when I left, my very first roommate post active duty training was a counselor. She was finishing her master's for school counseling. She was going to be a school counselor. Shout out to Krista. Love her. But she was really my first counselor without me realizing that I was receiving counseling. And the one thing that Krista did very, very well was she listened.
Yeah.
So post my first 4 years in the military, processing that, she would just sit there and listen. And the backstory to that is she has muscular dystrophy. So when I left the military and moved to this teeny tiny town in Iowa to go to school, she was the person that I ended up moving with, and she was total care. So I would have to put her from her wheelchair to the bed and then turn her over at night. And I used to work a 3 to 11. So when I would get home at about 11:15, 11:20, I would go turn her over, and then she would lay in bed, and she would ask me, how was your day? And so I would start to share with her, and then that would segue into other conversations. And for a year, that's what we did. So my introduction to counseling was not traumatic. My introduction to counseling was love and empathy and care and listening, and not listening to defend, and just listening to understand, because that's the one thing that Krista did well for me.
Yeah.
So when I finally got to that place in my life where I received counseling now from a quote unquote professional, where I thought, yep, I'm going to have to go get some help for this, I didn't walk in with any hesitations. There was no stigma associated with that, because my best friend had been my counselor.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, everybody was wired the way she was wired. So I'm thankful that God placed someone in my life that could introduce me to that, that didn't hurt me. And I didn't know, and maybe if I knew that I was being counseled, I might have looked at it differently. But because she was my friend, and that's what friends do, is they listen to each other, I never knew the difference. I just thought this is how it is. So my why, post that, you're talking 91, that happened in 91, fast forward to 2015, when I marry my husband, who's a senior pastor, and we're seeing people in our congregation left and right. And I'm telling my husband, we're not counselors. Why are we even offering this when we're not counselors? Do I believe that I've been given the gift to listen and empathize and war alongside you? Absolutely. But then there are some crossroads that we were finding that I was like, I don't think we need to be going into this territory. And I remember having that conversation with him, and he was like, but that's what pastors do. And I was like, do they? Should we? Are we qualified to do that? And I was in the process of finishing my doctorate. And so my area of study became mental health referrals. Why are pastors providing them or not providing them? What's the hiccup in there if they're not sending people out? Because we were coming across different individuals that had received poor counseling from previous pastors. So that's really what got the ball rolling for me. And so my why in this, once I completed my doctoral journey and I was able to have conversations with participants who were pastors and they're kind of sharing their life experiences, I realized some people are created to counsel and some people are not.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing I think is realizing when you're in the not category and having no shame and forwarding that person on to someone who has been trained to do that. So my why was specifically for leaders, to be able to give leaders, I know this sounds crazy because I'm nobody, but to give leaders permission to say no. I don't want to, but I can't. I'm not equipped to do this.
Yeah.
And then provide an understanding for congregants, for people within congregations that are seeking mental health support from their leaders, and have them extend grace when the leader says, I'm not qualified to do this. It has nothing to do with me not loving you, me not being in your corner, me not wanting to support you. It is because I love you and I want to support you that I'm going to put you in the hands of a professional, of somebody that's capable of helping you through this. So that was my why. And I think being able to have not just the conversations that we have already had, but the ones that are up and coming.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the platform that we're creating for that to take place.
And I think, a lot of it boils down to breaking the stigma all across the board, breaking the stigma about the conversations of mental health, breaking that stigma about saying, hey, I'm not equipped to handle this. I want to partner with you to find someone who can, and realizing that there's no shame in that. There's no shame in saying, look, I want the best for you, because at that point, it's not us centered. We don't need to be worried about us. We have to be focused on the person who is needing that assistance and help. And so kind of breaking that stigma down. I know you have a definition for stigma, because I think we hear that word and it's like a hot word nowadays. Like people just throw it around. So if you want to share your definition.
Yeah, this definition for stigma is a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. So synonyms to that specific word stigma are shame, disgrace, dishonor, stain, taint, blot, blemish, brand, mark, slur, and smirch. So in one of our previous episodes, I shared that my mom's favorite verse was the wages of sin are death.
Mm-hmm.
And I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s before I realized that I had attended a legalistic church. So when I say the word legalism or legalistic, for those that maybe are not Christian and don't understand that, I was raised in a Pentecostal background. So we're very demonstrative, very charismatic, very evangelical, but some circles in the Pentecostal world are very rule bound. So there are specific rules, and you don't break those rules.
Mm-hmm.
And if you break the rules, there's no grace in there for recovering from that. So I wasn't raised with the idea of a loving God and a merciful God or a forgiving God. The God that I knew was a judging God, and you either toted the straight line or you were out. Like, that's how I saw it. So the first time that I had suicidal ideation was because I thought I had outsinned God's ability to forgive me. So again, I was way in my 20s, early 30s before I realized I think I was raised in a legalistic church. Mm-hmm. So part of the stigma that I was raised with was, if you are a good Christian and you're following the rules that the Bible sets out for you, and you love God with all your heart, then you shouldn't be struggling with depression or anxiety or any negative thoughts of any sort. If you are, then it must be sin, and you did something to create that for yourself. And that's not always the case. Mm-hmm. I mean, science has proven that depression can be physiological. So it has nothing to do whether I'm sinning or not. It's just the way my body works, the chemistry in my body. So not only did I have to work through, I might be struggling with something, the second component, now I had to break the confidentiality of the four walls of my home, which I was raised not to do. Mm-hmm. So now I have to let someone else know I'm struggling. And then on top of that, God forbid if they were to prescribe medicine, because that was the trio, the disaster of them all. You had no faith, you went to see a doctor, and you're taking meds?
Yeah.
Like,
instant fire.
You're going to hell, straight to hell. So when I found myself, I was diagnosed with postpartum depression after my first child, and I thought, I'm going to have to do something. I knew something was wrong. Like, I'm not feeling myself. This isn't me. And I remember having to go back and tell my mom, and I'm in my 30s. I'm like a grown adult. There was this shame of having to confess I might have to take some medicine to help me feel better, and feeling guilty as I'm taking the medicine that's going to help me feel better. Now, I was only on it for a short term, but I remember the turmoil that I was in, and I just wanted to feel healthy. I wanted to be happy again, and I couldn't figure out how to do that on my own. And between counseling and the medicine, it helped me. Even though it was temporary, it helped me. So anyway, I think for me, it's just creating, I think, which is what we strive to do, is create the conversation. If you find yourself in that situation, then we want to be able to create a space where we'll help you walk through that without the shame, without the dishonor and the stain on my record. Oh my gosh, I went to see a counselor and I was on medicine. How horrible of a Christian am I?
Yeah. And I think too, when we started this, we weren't really sure, how it was going to be received, what sort of, I hate to say following, but like what sort of viewer, I don't know, the words are gone, but what sort of viewers we were going to have, you know what I mean? And we've had so many people, I mean, I don't want to speak for you. I've had so many people, come up to me and say, I'd never thought of this way, or, really opening up the doors of their own emotions and thoughts and mental health journey to say, I didn't realize that I even struggled with this, but it's something I want to tackle now, and I want to be able to talk to people about this and be open with this. We've had people who have called and have expressed that they were on the edge of committing suicide and have watched previous episodes with Christina Christ, and that really helped them break through that. So we've had a lot of viewers who I think are feeling our hearts on that and starting to have those conversations.
And I had someone send a message to me last week and said, thank you for coming at this from a different angle, because it's really allowing me to be able to see and process in my own journey, what is mental health. Mm-hmm. One of the things too, that I wanted to be able to communicate, and we've had this conversation, is I feel like we need to be intentional. Excuse me. Wow, that's
You
just
turn it into Kermit.
It's not going anywhere. It's staying. We've determined to be intentional with the platform that God has given us.
Yeah.
So this public platform, there's a responsibility, a weighty responsibility to do it well. So when we're long and gone, I'm hoping that this will continue to exist, right, in the world of the internet. My immediate heart is for those kids that are up and coming that feel a calling to counseling or some form of something having to do with support, mental health support.
Mm-hmm.
When we talked to Dr. Sanchez, he explained his journey was 10 years. From beginning of school to where he graduated, and he can say, I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
It was a 10-year journey.
Yeah.
So some of the people that are listening to this, it'll be a decade before they see that diploma on the wall that says you're a counselor now.
Which I loved his candor about that too, because I feel like there's such a pressure for our students. Like, you're a junior, senior in high school, and you've got to have your whole life figured out. I grew up thinking I was going to be an elementary education major. I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. And now looking back, I'm like, oh Lord, thank you for that. I did not want to do that for the rest of my life. And I thought I had that in me, but it took me quite a journey to realize, oh, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. So his candor in discussing that he didn't immediately have that heart for what he does now, but once he found that niche and that vein that his passion was in, he was able to just run with it. So I love that you pointed that out too.
Yeah, and I've counseled with him. Like, I've sat in the office with him, and so it wasn't so much that niche, it was his calling. Like,
Absolutely.
I believe he is anointed to be able to do exactly what he's doing, which is why he is, I hate to use the word successful, but he's a successful psychologist, and he is successfully walking people through and leading people through. You know, he's authored, let's put the book up. Where's the camera? Is it over here? Where is it? He's authored the book, The Resilient Mind, and that is exactly what he is doing. So again, it goes to legacy.
Yeah.
Once he's gone, this book will continue to speak for him when he's no longer here.
Yeah.
So that, to me, I think, is what I'm feeling this morning, is the weight of the responsibility that you and I have to bring people to that place of awareness. Pray about it. If we don't step up to, you know, we've talked about this. I think we've quoted this several times, where the word says, you were fearfully and wonderfully made. Fearfully means intentionally, which means everything that you have, everything that you possess, the way you think, the way you process information, the way you see the world, even if it's post-trauma, God gave that to you.
Yeah.
So if you have a gift for listening, if psychology just makes sense to you, if the brain is your happy place and you love reading about neuroplasticity and what the neurons are doing, then press into that and walk in that, because the future generations need, I believe, spirit-filled believers to be able to help them guide and tap into the very God gifting talents that God has given them. It's our responsibility to live that out to the best of our ability.
Yeah. And it's less about having the answers right then and there. You know, that's kind of been a theme that we've talked about throughout the season, be it with Tammy, Christina, Dr. Sanchez. There was each and every one of them was really focused on the methods to how you got to that point, whether it be a struggle, whether it be a success. But even in that same kind of conversation, you don't have to have the answer about what you're doing with your life, but pressing into those gifts and those passions that the Lord has for you. I don't remember what episode it was. And you were talking about, like, you just always listened. And I was like, oh yeah, I was just like the listener friend. And now looking back, I'm like, that tracks. Like, it all started to make sense now that I'm to the point where I'm at. And I think our guests have been really good too about being open and sharing that with us too.
Yeah, because Tammy shared how she was like, she was obedient, but she was like stubbornly obedient. I'm going to keep calling, but I don't want to really call, but I'm going to keep calling. I do want, so towards the end of our conversation here, I do want to visit with some of the things that Dr. Sanchez said.
Yes,
we were talking
absolutely.
about this. Do you want to, well, I can share, let me share what I'm going to call the mantle moment.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
what was the question that we asked him? I don't remember. But
honestly, I don't know. It was there was
a
lot.
It was an awesome interview.
It was.
But in one of those, as he was responding to one of the questions, he said, And I think it was tied into to his definition of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to title it The Mantle Moment based on what he said. And he said, imagine if there's a house fire and you're going back through the rubble and you're trying to find something in that rubble, and you find that one little thing that the fire didn't destroy. And you take that and you hang it back above the new mantle in your new home. And I remember saying in that space that when I visit with people that have just tragic, traumatic stories, backstories, and I always tell them, if it didn't kill you then, it won't kill you now. And that's kind of how I think that mantle moment came out. So for me, the beauty of mental health is realizing that it's not over until it's over.
Yeah.
Right. So when he gives that definition, like, I'm thinking what it must be like to go through rubble in your home and praying that my family pictures aren't destroyed and my high school diploma isn't destroyed. And you find that one little thing that really may not have even been important in your house before, but it's because it's the last thing left that the fire didn't destroy. That becomes the new first step to the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Until the next fire, because sometimes that happens. So it was the way that he described, find the one thing, which is his WAAT.
Yeah.
What's awesome about that.
Yeah.
So
What?
find the one thing. What?
What?
Find the one thing the fire didn't destroy.
Yeah.
Focus on the good of that. Hang that above your mantle. Literally pick up the pieces and keep going.
Yeah. And that was a very poignant moment for me too, because when you are standing before rubble, because I'm a very like immersive person. So when he was talking, I just kind of was picturing that in my head. And I think our natural reaction is just to get overwhelmed by the amount of debris and not know where to start. And it was kind of like a step-by-step guide of, if you're standing in front of rubble, if you feel like your whole life has burnt down, your step is that you need to be resilient and press in, and the action step of starting to go through stuff and look for that hope that is in the midst of the mess and the rubble. And so that was really poignant for me too. Another thing that it was kind of like a sort of moment for me was when he was talking about self-protection, and it was that mental prison. Because I feel like sometimes when we say self-protection, we get a little self-righteous with it, and it becomes so much of our identity. You know, those walls that we've put up for that protection is just who we are, and we're just callous and hard, and we're doing it for ourselves. But really, you've put yourself in that mental prison. And so when you reference a prison, I don't want to be behind bars like that. I don't want to be shackled to my emotions or my traumas or anything like that. So when he was talking about that, I feel like it just brought it into a whole new light of, hey, this might be where you're at, but you need to break out of that. And all I could think of was the examples of, like, if you kennel train a dog, and you open the door, the dog's not going to come out if they've been trained to just stay in the kennel.
Right.
And so many times in our lives, we are in that same way. You know, the Lord has opened up that door, but we don't want to take those action steps to step outside because we don't know what it's going to look like. What does it look like outside of the kenneled area in our lives? And I think that ties into the fire too, you know, having that hope to be able to press in and look through the debris and find that one good thing. And because there's always something that's good, whether
Right.
your whole life is hell in a handbasket, there's something that's good. And so shifting that perspective, that was a big takeaway for me for Dr. Sanchez's episode.
You know, something that you just said triggered this thought. Last night when we had youth, we were talking about what we learned, and I co-teach with some awesome leaders, and Matt is a formal military instructor. And so he thinks through exercises via teamwork. And so a lot of times when he puts together, he'll have like a whole night of team building exercises. And one of the recurrent themes that kept coming from the kids was, I didn't want to get in trouble. Well, I thought if I said this, I was going to get in trouble. And, you know, we're going back and forth, and it hit me in that moment. And so I told them, I said, here's the deal. This is a safe place because I can't spank you. I can't beat you. I can't, you know, put you out to dry. You're not going to go in timeout. You're not going to get suspended. It's okay to make mistakes because we learn through that. So a mistake, and I told him this last night, I said, what's the best gift that a mistake can give you? It's the lesson of what not to do. And I said, so the whole point of doing what we're doing in class, we're very non-traditional. Like our Bible study sessions are involved in like leadership training and teamwork training and camaraderie building.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, you know, collectively 40 years plus of military is going to do that to you. But it just makes me sad because I think, and I told the kids, I said, you know, I can't control what happens in your home. So you might come from a super strict house where you are getting smacked around. I don't know what your parents or your caretakers are doing, but here, this is your safe place to explore those boundaries of, am I a good listener? Am I a good leader? Do I not follow instructions well? Is that why we lost this challenge, is because I was the loose cannon in there that wasn't listening to the rules? But the concept of being okay to not be okay. They were so afraid to make the mistake that they froze.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to your kennel training, I'm not ever allowed to do this, so this is as far as I go. I don't have room to explore past this. So the fire, this has happened. I'm frozen. I can't. I don't even have it in me to go through the rubble and the debris.
Yeah.
But there's bound to be something in there that's salvageable. You're still salvageable. It doesn't matter what's happened to you up to this point. There's still enough in there of you to save.
Yeah.
You just have to be, because we can't do that for you. And I think that was in the totality of everything. It always takes that step of that person to want to be better.
Yeah.
I will join you on your journey, but you have to want to be better.
Yeah. Because we can't drag them kicking and screaming. We just can't. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, future episodes.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So I am really excited for everything to come. I'm really excited about the guests that we have scheduled. We've already got quite a few scheduled for our next season. We're going to take a few weeks where we don't have any episodes, and then we will start launching them. To find out information on when we're going to start dropping those, you can follow 1901 Media. We go to thebridgerocks.com and everything, all the information will be on there. But we have a first responder series that I'm excited about. I know that's kind of like dear to your heart as well. So I think that's going to be awesome. You want to talk about the next one we've got?
Yeah, speaking with religious leaders to discuss how different denominations address mental health concerns. So, and really, I think the main thing in here is twofold for me. One, we do want to find out how different denominations address mental health, because obviously not everybody's a Pentecostal. So you've got all kinds of denominations out there. So we want to know what's in place for that. But the second component of this is when I was doing my studies, some of the research kept showing that your mental health professionals could not understand why religious leaders were not forwarding their parishioners or congregants to see a mental health professional. So I also want to encourage mental health professionals that may not have a religious background. They may be agnostic. They may be atheists. They may say, hey, there's no superpower out there in heaven. But I implore you to take the time to hear us as to what's important to us. When I'm facing a crisis and I have no choice but to stumble into your office a broken mess, when I tell you that I feel like the Holy Spirit is guiding me to do this, or I feel like the Lord has told me to do that, create a space for me to be able to have that conversation, because that's real to me.
Yeah.
I'm not hallucinating. That's real to me.
Yeah.
And for someone who hasn't been raised with a religious background, that may sound like you're having a psychotic episode, and it's not. So if we're going to bridge that gap between religious leaders and the mental health professional field, someone has to be listening to what we're saying, because if they don't acknowledge it and respect it, that bridge will never be, or that gap will never be bridged. It'll just continue to be a hole in the middle of it, and we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So our goal is to kind of close that. And then we're also going to be talking about the mind, body, and gut connection to mental health, which I'm incredibly excited about, because I know there's like a lot of holistic healing that's very popular nowadays, and the connection of all of that to our traumas and our past, and what organs store what emotions and all of that. So we're going to kind of deep dive into that. We've got some specialists, professionals, I don't know what you want to call them, but coming in to have those conversations. So I'm really looking forward to what season 2 is going to hold. And as we come to a close, I hope that our viewers are excited. If they have any questions, if they want to reach out to anybody, you can always email us. It's 1901mediath@gmail.com. If you have topics that you want to hear us talk about, please reach out to us, comment on this video below. We're always checking those comments. Follow us on YouTube, 1901 Media, and I'm excited for what's next.
I am. And one thing I understand this now a little bit better is I've heard podcasts where they say, hey, drop a line where you're from. We are reaching people across the board. Like some of the comments that we've had have come as far as Texas, Louisiana,
Yeah.
North Carolina.
I've got some Maine people watching. Hey guys.
Hi,
So
Iowa.
whoop,
Shout
whoop.
out.
We can just shout out everybody.
So if you are watching, if you don't mind, in the comment section, just share where you're watching from. That
Yes.
helps us be able to figure out what our reach is. And as you said, if there's a specific topic that you think, hey, I've always had a question on this. Can you, if we don't know the answer, we'll find somebody who does, and we'll get them on here and we'll interview them, and we'll go deep on that subject.
Yeah, because that's the point. I mean, sometimes we have questions, but we know that there's some questions that I wouldn't ever think about. There's been people that have come up to me. They're like, hey, could you talk about this? I'm like, oh, that's a really good topic. I would have not thought about that. So we love our listeners, and we want to be able to speak to what they're going through too. So we just thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see what season 2 holds.
Season 2.
Whoop whoop.